Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Kodanitai, Maya Poshashi, Kodanitai, Maya Poshashi. Iskon Guru Vinda Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shishi Kodanitai, Maya Poshashi Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Prabhupada had been hearing regularly from his 6 disciples in London, having little money and living as separate couples in different parts of the city. He found their greatest inspiration in Prabhupada's letters. They would repeatedly read his instructions and dream of when he would one day visit them in London. Although in San Francisco, Krishna consciousness had been fun for the 3 couples, in England it was becoming more and more difficult. The devotees, being foreigners, were not allowed to earn a salary, and except for a few contacts, they knew no one. Although unable to live together, they were trying to maintain their morale and Krishna consciousness. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, this is Canto 6, Chapter 7, entitled Indra Offends Brihaspati, and it's text 8, 1. Okay. Okay, so this is Chapter 8, the Narayan Kavacha Shield, and it's text 1. Should we go through the introduction then? This chapter describes how Indra, the king of heaven, was victorious over the soldiers of the demons, and it also describes the shield of the Vishnu mantra. To take shelter from the shield, that's where kavacha is, isn't it? Shield, kavacha, the singer kavacha. One must first touch kusha grass and wash one's mouth with Archaman mantras. One should observe silence and then place the 8-syllable Vishnu mantra on the parts of his body and place the 12-syllable mantra on his hands. The 8-syllable mantra is Om Namo Narayana. This mantra should be distributed all over the front and back of the body. The 12-syllable mantra, which begins with the pranam Amkara, is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. One syllable should be placed on each of the fingers and should be preceded by the pranav Amkara. Thereafter, one must chant progressively and place the syllables of the mantra on the heart, the head, between the 2 eyebrows, and on the seeker and between the eyes. And then one should chant Ma Ashraya Fat, and with this mantra protect himself from all directions. Na Devo Devam Acharyat. One who has not risen to the level of a deva cannot chant this mantra. According to this direction of the Shastra, one must think himself qualitatively non-different from the Supreme. After finishing this dedication, one must offer a prayer to the 8-armed Lord Vishnu, who sits on the shoulders of Garuda Dev. One also has to think of his fish incarnation, Vamana, Kurma, Nasinga, Varaha, Parashuram, Ramachandra, the elder brother of Lakshman, Narayan, Dattatreya, an empowered incarnation, Kapila, Sanat Kumar, Hayagriva, and Naradev, the incarnation of a devotee, Danvantara, Rishabdev, Yogya, Balaram, Vyasadev, Buddhadev, and Keshava. One should also think of Govinda, the master of Vrindavan, and one should think of Narayan, the master of the spiritual sky. One should think of Madhusudan, Tridam, Madhva, Hrishikesh, Padmanabh, Janardhan, Damodar, and Vishveshvara as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. After offering prayers to the Lord's personal expansions, known as the Swamsa and Shaktivesh avatars, one should pray to the weapon of Lord Narayan, such as the Sudarshan, Gada, Shankha, Khadga, and bow. After explaining this process, Shukadeva Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit how Vishvarup, the brother of Vritasura, described the glories of the Narayan Kavacha to Indra. Okay, so it's text 1. Well, actually, I'll just read the translation. King Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva Goswami, "My Lord, kindly explain the Vishnu mantra armor that protected King Indra and enabled him to conquer his enemies, along with their carriers, and enjoy the opulence of the 3 worlds. Please explain to me that Narayan armor by which King Indra achieved success in battle, conquering the enemies who were endeavoring to kill him." Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, King Indra, the leader of the demigods, inquired about the armor known as Narayana Kavacha from Vishvarup, who was engaged by the demigods as their priest. Please hear Vishvarup's reply with great attention. Vishvarup said, if some form of fear arrives, one should first wash his hands and legs clean and then perform archaman by chanting this mantra. Om apavitra pavitro va savastam gato piva yasmare pandarikaksham sabhavayantara suchi Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu. Then one should touch kusha grass and sit gravely and silently facing north. When completely purified, one should touch the mantra composed of 8 syllables to the 8 parts of his body and touch the mantra composed of 12 syllables to his hands. Thus, in the following manner, he should bind himself with the Narayan coat of armor, first while chanting the mantra composed of 8 syllables, Om Namo Narayana, beginning with the pranav, the syllable Om. One should touch his hands to his 8 parts of his body, starting with the 2 feet, and progressively, systematically to the knees, thighs, abdomen, heart, chest, mouth, and head. Then one should chant the mantra in reverse, beginning from the last syllable, Ya, while touching the parts of his body in the reverse order. These 2 processes are known as Utpatti Nyas and Sanghara Nyas, respectively. Anybody want to try that? Then one should chant the mantra composed of 12 syllables. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. preceding each syllable by the Omkara. One should place the syllables of the mantra on the tips of his fingers, beginning with the index finger of the right hand and concluding with the index finger of the left. The 4 remaining syllables should be placed on the joints of the thumbs. One must then chant the mantra of 6 syllables. Om Vishnave Namaha. One should place the syllable Om on his heart, the syllable V on the top of his head, and the syllable Sa between his eyebrows, the syllable Na on the left tuft of hair, Sika, and the syllable V between his eyes. The chanter of this mantra should then place the syllable Na on all joints of his body and meditate on the syllable Ma as being a weapon. We should thus become the perfect personification of the mantra. Thereafter, adding Visaga to the syllable Ma, he should chant the mantra Ma Ashtraya Fat in all directions, beginning from the east. In this way, all directions will be bound by the protective armor of the mantra. Text 11. After finishing this chanting, one should think himself qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full in 6 opulences and is worthy to be meditated upon. Then one should chant the following protective prayer to Lord Narayan in the Narayan Kavacha. The Supreme Lord, who sits on the back of the bird Garuda, touching him with his lotus feet, holds 8 weapons: the conch shell, disc, shield, sword, club, arrows, bow, and ropes. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead protect me at all times with his 8 arms. He is all-powerful because he fully possesses the 8 mystic powers, Anima, Lagima, etc. We could do that one, or because it's been so long now, I was just going to read the purport. Unless you want to go through that one? I suppose we could get protection by doing it. Om Hariya Vidajan Mama Savaraksham. Om Hare Vridayan Mama Savaraksham. Nyastangri Padma Patajendra Ishte. Nyastangri Padma Patagendra Prishte. Tadarari Kamasai Gadeshu Chapa. Dararai Chamasi Gadeshu Chapa. Pasan Dadano Staguno Stabahu. Pashan Dadanu Staguno Stabahu. Om Hariya Vidajan Mama Savaraksham. Nyastangri Padma Patangendra Prishte. Darari Chamasi Gadeshu Chapa. Pashandadano Staguno Stabahu. Om Hariya Vidajan Mama Savaraksham. Yastangri Bhama Patangendra Prishte. Dadari Chamasi Gadeshu Chapa. Pashandadano Staguno Sabahu. Savaraksham. Ashtangri Padma Patagendra Prishte. Gadeshu Chapa. Pasandadano Saguno Sabahu. Om Hare Vadayan Mama Savaraksham. Nastangri Padma Patagendra Prishte. Dadari Chamasi Gadeshu Chapa. Asandano Stagono Stabahu. Om. O Lord, Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vidajat, may He bestow Mama, my, Sarvaraksham, protection from all sides, Nyasta, placed, Angry Padma, whose lotus feet, Patagendra Prishte, on the back of Garuda, the king of all birds, Dada, conch shell, Ari, disc, Chama, shield, Asi, sword, Gada, club, Ishu, arrows, Chapa, bow, Pashan, ropes, Tadana, holding, Ashta, possessing 8, Guna, perfections, Ashta, 8, Bahu, arms. Supreme Lord who sits on the back of the bed Garuda, touching him with his lotus feet, holds 8 weapons, the conch shell, disc, shield, sword, club, arrows, bow, and ropes. May that Supreme Personality of God protect me at all times with his 8 arms. He is all-powerful because he fully possesses the 8 mystic powers, Anima, Lagima, etc. Responsible, please. The Supreme Lord who sits on the back of the bed Garuda, touching him with his lotus feet, holds 8 weapons, the conch shell, disc, shield, sword, club, arrows, bow, and ropes. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead protect me at all times with his 8 arms. He is all-powerful because he fully possesses the 8 mystic powers, Anima, Lagima, etc. Thinking oneself one with the Supreme is called Ahangraho Pashana. Through Ahangraho Pashana, one does not become God, but he thinks of himself as qualitatively one with the Supreme, understanding that as a spirit soul he is equal in quality to the Supreme Soul, the way the water of a river is of the same nature as the water of the sea. One should meditate upon the Supreme Lord as described in this verse and seek his protection. Living entities are always subordinate to the Supreme. Consequently, their duty is to always seek the mercy of the Lord in order to be protected by him in all circumstances. Vanchikalpatrubhischa kripasindhubhyevacha padidinam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupagada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasali Gaurivatarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada says the river is like the sea, because also the river is not like the sea, because the river is salty and the sea isn't. Although you could say the river has the same quality as the sea, because it's wet and it flows around. So similarly, qualitatively we're the same, but there's a few things that Krishna has. There's two particular qualities that Krishna has that the living entity doesn't have. Anyone know what they are? Mentioned in the first canto. The very first text of the first canto mentions 2 things the Supreme Lord has that the living entity doesn't have. Which is Swarat, isn't it?
Abhigya Swarat, yeah. And then he's all...
Abhigya, yeah, all cognizant. So he's aware of everything going on. We're only aware of what's going on in our body, but Krishna is aware of what's going on in everybody's body. Everybody's body. And he's independent. So he could walk up to a cliff and then decide to walk off it, and he could just stand there in midair. Because he can defy the law of gravity. He can defy any law, because he's the lawmaker. So he's above all the laws. Whereas the jiva, unfortunately, isn't. Or fortunately isn't. It would be chaos if he wasn't. So the laws keep the living entity checked, so that he can try and be God, but in a very confined space. Like if you have a child that's a bit naughty, and you put it in a little, these little kind of like cage things, the kids climbing up to try and look up, but he can't go outside. He can't fall down the stairs or pull anything off. So they just keep him confined until the kid's more mature. Then he can give the kid a bit more freedom. So the living entity, when he's become naughty, then he's confined to the material energy. And so we're trying to reform and not be naughty anymore. And then Krishna can actually give us the ability to be Swarat and Abhigya to some degree. And that's why Lord Brahma, he's aware of everything going on in the universe. He's aware of all the living entities. So that's when the consciousness becomes expanded and empowered. Bless you. Any questions or comments? It's interesting, isn't it, how mantra is there to protect. And it creates an armor. Because we just had a meeting with the last week with the mental health first aiders, and this next Tuesday coming up, they want to do a meditation for like 20 minutes. They want me to lead them in a meditation for 20 minutes, because they're painfully aware that they're more at risk than the people they're helping, because they're trying to help them. It's a high suicide rate for mental health first aiders. So they want to insulate themselves. So I was explaining that the way mantra works is it creates an armor, a psychic shield, so that when people try to say nasty things, and you can deflect it. So that's why mantra is very powerful. So you'll notice yourself, if you chant very good japa and people insult you, it's like water off a duck's back. If your japa is not so good, it's, who are you looking at, eh? What's your problem? So if you have the mantra there, then you're free of your false ego. It's usually the false ego that causes the problem, more than anything else. Who does he think he's talking to? That's the false ego. Well, he doesn't know who he's talking to. You don't even know who he's talking to. So how's he going to know? When you know who he is talking to, then you'll know that you're a spirit soul. Then you won't be bothered anymore. So mantra is very, very, very useful. And these mantras are more to protect them, their bodies. But the mantra that we're chanting, the Hare Krishna mantra, is to protect our consciousness. And it's the consciousness that we're most concerned with, even more than the body. The body is flapping for some years. Srila Prabhupada says, for a little short time, the body flaps. And it's interesting because if you see a flag on a still day, it's just like limp. And then there's a gust of wind. And you go, oh, look, the flag's alive. Look, it's fluttering about and it's doing all kinds of funny little dances. And then the wind stops. And the body's like that. Body comes up, it flaps around for a bit, and then down it goes. That's the end of that. So don't get yourself in a flap. So any questions about? Yes, Ashish Prabhu.
On this independence and all-knowing thing, a pure devotee, is he then fully independent? Does he become fully independent, and does he become fully all-cognizant?
Yeah. Oh, it was none, no. So when you become pure, you become fully independent. Yeah, I was listening to Memories a little while ago, And there's 3 occasions the devotees, different devotees were saying they'd been on walks with Srila Prabhupada, and he didn't leave a footprint behind him. They were walking on the sand, and there was everybody else's footprint, but not Srila Prabhupada's. And then they were walking on the grass. There was everybody else's footprint, but Srila Prabhupada's. So that's one indication of how the pure devotee. And one time Srila Prabhupada was walking up a hill with some of his disciples, and then he stopped and he started laughing, and he said, we will stop now so that my disciples can have a rest. They were completely out of breath trying to keep up with Srila Prabhupada. He was just kind of floating up the hill. Yeah.
Krishna, it's just I'm remembering something that Maharaj said, I think yesterday, that when the devotee gets pure, then Krishna personally comes and takes the part of the super soul. So Krishna personally is there directing the individual soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Krishna is directing the wanderings of all living entities, and then when the living entity gives up his independence in this false ego, then he's being directed, which is basically what Guru Tattva means. Guru Tattva means that you're now under the shelter of Radharani or under the shelter of Balaram. So that's how you'll know when you've come in contact with your Guru, because he'll say just what you need to hear. Or if you're listening on a regular basis to his lectures or reading his books, then it'll always be just very apt. And then you'll know, okay, this is my Guru, or this is one of my Gurus, because Guru Tattva is not limited to one. You may have one Diksha, but you have many Shiksha Gurus. And the Shiksha is the thing that really propels us in devotional service. So when the spiritual master's instruction enters the heart, then the spiritual master enters also when you decide to comply. Okay, I'm submissive. I've heard this and I'm going to... They say that's the first symptom of the flowering of the hearing process, the ability to put it into practice. So we hear a lot of stuff, right? And it goes in one ear and out the other. So when the hearing process is starting to actually blossom, then you'll suddenly retain what you're hearing and it'll be implemented. So that'll be the sign that the hearing process... Otherwise you could say, yeah, I did hear you, but I didn't register it. So there's a difference between, you can be chanting, and it's interesting that Kandama Ganamara says that's the second part of chanting. The first part is the effort, and the second part is the darshan. So the darshan comes when you're chanting, when suddenly you're able to actually hear it. There's a shift from making this noise, so suddenly, Hare Krishna, and then it's, oh wow, I can hear it, and then it becomes conscious. And Dhira Shanta Maharaj was being very humble, wasn't he? Because he was saying, Apana Samsitam Garam Yanama Vivisogram, living beings entangled in the complicated meshes, even unconsciously, can be freed. And he was saying, for like 30 years, he thinks his chanting was just unconscious, But it's a stage that you have to go through before you can become conscious. You have to become aware that you're not very conscious. And then try to become conscious. And then as you become conscious, then you're able to hear the mantra. Then the mantra can enter into the heart. Machita Sabadegani. Once it enters the heart, then all the Degani, all the problems disappear. Question.
I think it's a part of the mantra. Of course, mantra is the most important source of protection, taking the shelter of the holy name, but also recognizing other things that support the chanting, and help the devotee to be protected. So there's like a different number of things. You mentioned kind of cultivating humility, because you become proud, you start losing that protection. It kind of can lead you into offenses. Committing offenses to devotees. Culture is also there to protect. We have a Vaishnava Vedic culture. It gives a certain protection. Association with devotees, taking shelter of prasadam as well, especially in the beginning stages.
That's why devotees have a very large plate so they can hide behind the prasadam. And Maya can't see them. The prasadam's there.
It's just like a couple other things, and other devotees can tell other things that gives them protection.
just to refresh what's happening here, the demigods have been asking for, they've been given kavachas to protect themselves and the different parts of their body. And so then we're just talking about how the Maha Mantra especially protects the consciousness. And so Raghunath is saying the culture also helps us to, enhances our ability to take shelter of the mantra, being in a mode of goodness, being clean, respectful, humble, compassionate. These are all activities which nourish the process of chanting Charana. Sudha Bhakta Charana Renu. The pure devotional creeper is nourished by all these different acts of service. So then that brings us to the point where we can chant nicely and chant consciously. And we shouldn't become frustrated at our progress because we have to be patient when we're practicing Krishna consciousness. And Krishna's encouraging Arjuna suitable practice and detachment. So that detachment, when a person is very passionate and he practices something suitably, he becomes discouraged when he doesn't get the result as quickly as he was hoping he would. So he has to be detached. If you're very attached, then that's a symptom of passion. So you have to practice it in a detached way. I'm trying. Doesn't seem to be a lot happening, but it'll happen in good time, I'm sure, when Krishna thinks I'm ready. And then it's actually by Krishna's mercy that we get that prema, we get that affection for Krishna. And we can't force. We have to just, whenever Krishna decides to turn on our affection for him. But it's up to him to do that. So it behooves us to be humble and enthusiastic and confident and patient. And so that's the hard part, because you can be very enthusiastic and very confident for a while, but then it can start wearing thin after a while. It's like, what? There's nothing happening, you know. So then the patient part is the ability to sustain confident enthusiasm over a prolonged period of time, and that's where our mettle is tested. And yes, so we have so many shields to insulate us against the influence of the material energy. And the nature of the illusory energy is that it takes away the intelligence. So it takes away the discrimination. So, and that's why sometimes we can find ourselves saying, I just do not understand why he did that or why she did that. And the reason we can't understand is because they don't understand either, you know, because that's the influence of the illusory energy. You do things and afterwards you think, that was so stupid. Why did I do that, you know? And then being conscious is that you have this ability to be able to clarify things. Symptom of the mode of goodness is you see things in the true perspective, and then you can make good decisions. You know, if you have an important decision to make, don't make the decision before you chant your japa. You may find the decision has changed 180 degrees just by allowing the japa. Krishna is saying, Tesham evanu kampatam jnana deepena, then the lamp of knowledge. He'll shine that lamp so that we can see clearly.
Also, what comes to the mind, in order to put your shield up, you have to recognize where is the enemy. Because usually in the material conception, what is enemy, and spiritual conception, what is enemy, is quite opposite, 180 degrees.
Yeah.
So, in order to be recognized the enemy, like a study of the scripture, and also taking guidance from senior devotees and etc. Because you may think the thing that is your friend, it can be your worst enemy.
You know that book by Devamrita Maharaj, Bhava Bhakti? There's a conversation going on between him and between the living entity and Maya. And Maya comes up and she puts her arm around the living entity. She says, look, she doesn't come up and say, I'm your enemy. She comes up and says, I'm your friend, I mean, Krishna's your enemy. I mean, the guy's, he's intense, I mean, he's really pushy, for one thing. And he's had you hanging on now for 20 years. When was the last time you got a taste? Quite a while ago. Well, there you go then. I'm just trying to keep you going, I've got a few things here we could get into, I mean, of course, you You're still a devotee. Krishna's still God. And so she doesn't come as the enemy. She comes as your best friend. She's got your back. She's just going to help things be a little, put a bit of a taste in there for you, keep you going, So that's why we have to be conversant with the philosophy so we can identify. Like gardening, you have to know what the weeds are. If you don't know what the weeds are, you end up pulling out all the plants and you end up with these weeds, which is what I've been doing. I've seen these things and I thought they looked really good. And now that they're big enough, I've realized they're weeds. But they looked okay in the beginning. So we have to be aware of what is the enemy, what is the weed, what is the deviation and tight association. Well, it means having trust as well, because sometimes you may not see it and somebody else is saying he can see it very clearly. So you think, okay, well, I'll trust him, although it doesn't seem such a big problem myself. And then later on, okay, that was really good, So then you'll be more inclined to trust. And then you may have others that you trust, and then you realize, okay, so I'm going to have to be careful who I trust and whose advice I take, whose direction I take, because they may not be fully conversant with the situation. So generally, if you're with devotees that you've served over a long period of time, then there's more ability for them to help, because they know the situation.
Thank you, bro. On this passion and detachment, so suitable practice and detachment, I wonder, a passionate person, if he's detached of it, how would he possibly get the motivation to continue? If we tell him that no, you have to be detached as well.
Well, it's like if you want to get out of a hole and somebody throws the rope down and they say grab the rope, and you say, well, I'm actually detached, so you've not got much chance of getting out the hole. So you just have to be careful what it is. You have to be attached to something. So when Krishna is saying practice with suitable practice and detachment, he's meaning be detached from your preconceived idea of how you think things should work out. You're practicing something. Like if you're going to a gym and you're doing muscle building, you're doing it. And then if you've been in the gym for 20 years and you stand in front of the mirror and you're still a really spindly little guy, and you've got no muscles at all, you're like really thin and skinny, then you become frustrated, and think, I'm going to give this up. So being detached is being detached from our preconceived idea of what we think it's supposed to be, and being attached to the rope of the holy name, to the process of Krishna consciousness. It's a lot easier to be attached when you're attracted, you see. The problem is we're attracted to the wrong thing, and we're trying to get attracted to the right thing. So we're trying to give up the sticky rope that we've been holding on for so long and grab the other rope, So in the intermediate stage, it's difficult, because you're trying to get free of anatta, of unwanted, and the anatta may still be wanted. So first of all, we have to say, okay, I'm attached, but it's unwanted. So you establish that first of all. I have these attachments, but I don't want these attachments. So then you're going through the stage of anatta and nivritti, getting free from them. And then eventually when 75% of them are gone, then you can hold the rope. That's nishta. Then you're fixed. Then you don't let go of the rope. You're always holding the rope. And then obviously, if you're doing water skiing and you keep let go of the rope, then every time you let go, you keep going down. And then they go, come back. Okay, throw him the rope again. He gets back. Okay, now don't let go. And then he lets go. And then eventually he goes back under. Then eventually, nishta, he's holding it all the time. Then he's on the rope. He's getting pulled along. Okay, he's managing to keep hold of it now. So then comes ruchi. Then he can hit one of those those slopes. But he has to establish first of all that he has to hold on. He has to become attached to that. And he has to let go of the things, the unwanted things, you see. So Krishna is saying, suitable practice and detachment. So part of suitable practices is that you're cultivating the detachment from the unwanted things, and you're becoming more attached to him, more connected. Prabhupada uses the expression dovetailed, that you become connected to that, and then that pulls you away from what you were dovetailed to before.
So my question is, how can we maintain or intensify the desire to want to hold on to the right rope? Because we have to be enthusiastic and confident, but sometimes the desire to do that is not always there.
Yeah, wasn't Maharaj just talking about the how do I questions? Do you remember he was saying that yesterday? What was he saying about that, the how do I questions?
He said that be dependent on Krishna. It's not how do I cannot do anything.
Yeah. Oh,
Krishna.
Yeah, how do I? That was it. Yeah, it's not how do I, it's how does Krishna. How can I get Krishna to do it? So the how do I is, it's like when you're chanting, how do I chant properly? So it's like I'm really the controller here, rather than how does Krishna, how can I attract Krishna to dance on my tongue and take residence in my heart? So that's a handy thing to learn. It can take a few years to get the hang of it, but how can I chant in such a way that I'm not trying to control the mantra, but I'm allowing the mantra to control me?
So Prabhupada gives a nice comparison. He says that when the astronauts go into outer space, then they may stay up there for some time, but they cannot remain there. And after some time, they have to come back to Earth. So he compares this to the so-called detachment of the impersonalists, that they give up. He says it's the nature of the soul to be attached. Now, the impersonalists, they give up being attached to the material world and they may enter the Brahmajyoti. It's the ultimate which they can do. And because the soul is by nature active, it has no resting place, it has to come back down to the material world again. Whereas the devotees, they transfer their shelter or attachment, because basically attachment is basically taking shelter of something, isn't it? So they transfer their attachment to Krishna. They transfer instead of taking shelter of the usual material things that we've done for so long, then we learn to try to transfer that, taking shelter of Krishna. And we especially feel that when we're in a vulnerable situation, or we put ourselves in a situation which is we are obviously not the controller of it. Some things we can do, like say for example, you say, okay, can you wash the dishes? Not too many people will get that wrong. But if you have to do something like take some responsibility or go and put yourself out, in front line of preaching activities, then you can't really do that without taking shelter of Krishna. So I guess in all activities, the idea is to, whatever we're doing, there's always going to be some kind of challenge where we have to learn to take shelter in Krishna.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking also the example of the monkey and the cat. No, it's the cat and the mouse, isn't it? The cat, in the jaws of the cat. Then the mouse is finished, but the kitten can take shelter. So if you can take shelter of Krishna if you're properly aligned with what Krishna wants of you and what you're trying to. But you will only get that protection, that loving protection, if you're approaching Krishna for that. Yeah, so Krishna is the controller. Bhaktaram yagatape sham sarvaloka. So the pangs that we experience are because we're not recognizing. So we want to become peaceful. So we have to give up our resistance and allow Krishna. Okay, you're the controller. So please direct me. Shanti. Then you become Shanti.
Yes, also it seems that the thing that we would like to be protected from as well kind of evolves over the time of being devotee. Like in the beginning, maybe, please protect me from losing some money, or protect me from losing some job, and then, maybe protect me from such situation, and or for some anartha. And eventually, like Prabhupada, we hear that he prays, don't let me, or pure devotees don't let me to forget, like in a more subtle, don't let me forget you, Krishna. Or Prabhupada also exemplified, please protect me from fall down.
Yeah.
Because that's he's always explaining that the only reason why pure devotee doesn't fall down, because he's always praying for protection, so he feels that vulnerable situation of always needed protection.
Yeah, sometimes we don't want to give up our protection, or we think we're protecting ourselves by not putting ourselves in a vulnerable condition. Yeah. I don't want this devotee to have a lesser estimation of me, so therefore let me not tell him, my weaknesses, and that way I'll be stronger. I'll be less vulnerable. But just because you don't communicate your vulnerability doesn't mean that it's not there. And then you become more vulnerable, actually. and it's interesting. Mahaprabhu was saying that Srila Prabhupada was he was there with his disciples. He's the head of the whole spiritual movement, and he's saying that he was having a dream that his Guru Maharaj was coming to him and saying, "Take sannyas," and he was making himself very vulnerable by saying he was really horrified by the idea of doing it. So the disciples could have taken it, oh, he can't be that advanced if he was horrified about taking sannyas. But they took it how open and honest Prabhupada was, and he was willing to make himself vulnerable like that. And then the disciples loved him even more. So if in our relationships we are afraid to be vulnerable, then the depth of the relationship stays quite shallow. So making yourself vulnerable actually makes you stronger. Oh, you're not so much making yourself vulnerable, actually. You are vulnerable. You're just recognizing you're vulnerable and putting down the camouflage that's hiding your vulnerability, so that, the devotees must think, I'm really fired up. I really had a huge day on Sankirtan today. They must be thinking I'm so fired up, they must think I'm really staunch. And then surprisingly, sometimes you reveal, and then it turns out, the devotee knew it anyway, you could see it anyway, and you were only kidding yourself on with your camouflage and nobody else, But that's Guya Makachi Prichati, isn't it? It's to be able to, and you can't just open up to anybody. You have to be careful that you don't open up to just anybody and everybody also. It has to be somebody who's devoid of the propensity to criticize. So if you feel the person is going to be like that and be critical, then it wouldn't be good to open up and make yourself vulnerable. It's interesting. What we want, what we're looking for is, just as even living entities, not even as devotees, is intimate connection. And it's the very thing, it's the first thing we do when we feel we're vulnerable or threatened, is to distance ourselves. No communication. I'm going to stonewall you. I don't want you to approach me. I don't want you to trespass onto my castle. I'm here, and And so then we disconnect, which is the very thing we don't want, actually. But we do that as a strategy to ensure that we're safe. We're in a safe place. But it's not very safe at all, actually. So if you have relationships with devotees you can trust, where the lines of communication are always open, then you're reasonably safe. There was one parent was telling me that she's never had much problems with her children because she's always kept the lines of communication open. So as soon as there's a problem, immediately the child can go to the parent and the parent will listen, you know. So we can look at that in our lives. Do we have plenty of relationships, or at least a few relationships, where the lines of communication are always open? And if we do, then we're reasonably safe. A lot safer than if we don't anyway. Jai. Iskon Guruvinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Gaura Premanandi.